Chapter 16, Other Kinds of Investments. This is part 3 of 3, a mini focus on investing. As you have heard me say over and over again, you will learn that the laws of money, the laws of the universe, and the laws of nature are pretty much the same thing. And an example we covered in the first of this 3-part series is to admire the symmetrical, but invest in the asymmetrical. We saw this with stocks and mutual funds, which are groups of stocks. The magnitude of the possible growth is higher than the magnitude of the possible loss, making this asymmetry great for investing. And here is our final example. Pick assets that do not travel together, do not correlate, or in other words, negatively correlate. To review, assets are anything that can be exchanged for cash, and ideally, you get a higher amount of cash for your assets in the future. There are 6 major asset classes. Remembering all the differences between each asset class is not important. What is important is recognizing that if you don't want to be an expert in one financial asset class, you can just diversify across all of them. Here are the 6 major asset classes. Stocks. Stocks represent partial ownership of a company, thinking of it as owning a percentage. For example, let's say you own 1% of Bob's Bananas. If Bob's Bananas turns out to be the Burger King of bananas and the company grows into a $1 million business, your 1% stock certificate is now worth $10,000. Here's the second major asset class, bonds. Bonds are IOUs, literally. The provider of the bond, government or company, owes you a higher amount of money for you buying their bond. You give cash to the government or corporation, and they owe you more money in the future. For example, you buy a bond for $500, it will be $1,000 if you hold it for some amount of time. Third asset class are commodities. Commodities are natural resources that people usually spend money on to survive. The fourth class of asset are precious metals, which is very similar to a commodity because metals have special uses. What came after the Stone Age? The Bronze and Iron Age. What other asset class has millennia named after it? Clearly, commodities are important. The 5th major asset class are currencies. Currencies are different systems of money used by different countries. You can profit off of who needs what currency and when. And then there's real estate. Real estate is beneficial for 2 main reasons. First, houses tend to increase in value over time, and most repairs and adjustments tend to increase the value even more. Second, during that entire period of time, the property is growing in value and you can collect rent. So, we know there are 6 major asset classes. We also know that diversification is both a simple and effective way to make those 6 asset classes generate money. Now, let's hit this law of money. You want to pick assets that do not travel together, do not correlate. A correlation is when 2 things travel together. So if you see Mermaid Man, chances are Barnacle Boy's presence is correlated, meaning you're probably going to see Barnacle Boy too if you see Mermaid Man. Similarly, if you see Batman, you know Robin's not far behind. And if you see Robin, probably definitely Batman is nearby. Think of it this way. If you are buying ice cream, chances are it's going to be warmer outside. It doesn't mean that it's guaranteed. There's just a higher probability. Correlation does not mean causation. You will hear this phrase a lot. In other words, just because 2 things travel together does not mean one caused the other. Sunburn and ice cream travel together. They correlate. People are more likely to get sunburned in the summer, and they're also more likely to get ice cream in the summer. However, the sun causes both the sunburn and the increase in ice cream sales. The sunburn and ice cream do not cause one another. They simply travel or correlate together. Sometimes you want frozen yogurt during blizzards. It's just the case that sometimes things travel together without one thing necessarily causing the other. Here's a cool diagram. This is the sale of ice cream in green and the presence of forest fires in red. One does not cause the other. They just happen to travel together in the summer. Similarly, here's an interesting diagram of people who drowned after falling out of a fishing boat in red and the marriage rate in Kentucky. Both things just travel together, probably out of coincidence. Just because they travel together does not mean one caused the other. To illustrate how things travel together, we draw an x-axis and a y-axis. If two things travel together, we draw a line upward. We call this a positive correlation. Since rising temperatures and ice cream sales often travel together, the positive correlation below is very sensible. Here's a picture of a negative correlation. View or think of it as an escalator going down. If two things travel in opposite directions, we draw a line downward. We call this a negative correlation. An example of a negative correlation might be the sale of soup as temperature rises. People want less hot soup in the summer. But here is the mystery and the important question for this video. Do you want the securities in your portfolio to be positively or negative correlated? The answer is negative. You want the stocks, bonds, precious metals, and other assets of your retirement and brokerage accounts to be negatively correlated. Why is that? Imagine that you have two internet companies you invest in, and they're positively correlated. So sales or use of Twitter probably is highly correlated with that of Facebook. But if one company loses money, the other loses money. They are both internet technology companies. So you aren't really diversifying when you have two very similar companies. And when you're not diversified, it means that when one loses money, the other could lose money. However, if you have a negative correlation like Toyota and Facebook, chances are sales of cars have nothing to do with Facebook revenue. So if one goes up, it really has nothing to do with the other. So your portfolio is protected. All right, go to nicheclinic.org/chapter 16 to take your quiz.